You know, Canada has always had this image, right? A peaceful, multicultural mosaic. But what happens when the world's biggest fights stop being distant headlines and start playing out right here on our own streets? Well, global tensions are creating some unprecedented challenges right here at home, and it's putting that entire Canadian identity to the test.
So, in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how these international tensions are spilling over. We're going to look at the data, we'll hear some really personal stories, and we'll even examine some pretty serious reports on institutional influence to get a handle on how the very fabric of Canadian society is being strained like never before.
Okay, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start with the spillover effect we're seeing in our communities. Then look at the spike in hate crimes. From there, we'll dig into a personal account of radicalism that started right here in Canada, and then zoom out to look at allegations of institutional infiltration. And finally, we'll get to the really tough questions all this brings up for the whole country.
So to kick things off, let's look at how the conflict between Israel and Hamas is having a direct and frankly painful impact right here. This isn't just a news story from far away anymore. It's actively tearing at Canada's own sense of safety and our ability to just peacefully coexist.
And the impact is incredibly tangible and just deeply unsettling. I mean, these aren't abstract fears. These are frightening, real-world incidents reported by communities from Montreal to Edmonton. We're talking about gunshots fired at Jewish schools, a mosque being desecrated. This kind of targeted violence and intimidation creates a climate of fear that just ripples through entire neighborhoods.
And all of this leads directly to a documented rise in tensions. Law enforcement and academics are both tracking a really disturbing trend. A sharp increase in hate that's putting multiple communities on edge.
According to Dr. Mira Sukharov, who's a political science professor, there's been a serious spike in hate crimes against both Jewish and Muslim communities since October 7th. The numbers are way higher than they were for the same time last year. So the data makes it crystal clear this is not a one-sided issue. Multiple groups are feeling more and more threatened.
This communication breakdown is just perfectly illustrated by this one political slogan, "From the river to the sea." For so many who chant it, it's a call for freedom and equal rights. But for many in the Jewish community, hearing a phrase that's actually written into the Hamas charter, well, it feels like a direct existential threat. And that huge gap in perception is fueling so much fear and deepening the divide.
But these tensions aren't just about a current conflict spilling over from somewhere else. Sources point to fundamentalist ideologies that can take root right here at home, completely separate from what's happening overseas.
This is a really powerful perspective from author and activist Yasmin Mohammed. She describes experiencing what she calls Stone Age practices and abuse, not in some distant country, but while growing up right here in Canada. Her whole point is that a fundamentalist ideology isn't bound by geography, it's carried in your mind.
Now, based on her own experience, she outlines this clear process of indoctrination. It starts with isolation from Canadian culture. Then there's a demand for rote memorization of religious texts, without any focus on actually understanding what it means. And finally, any kind of critical question gets punished. The goal, she argues, is to create this completely closed-off system that prevents integration and fosters a separate, parallel society.
Okay, so this takes us from a very personal story to a much wider and frankly more alarming perspective that's being presented by some security analysts. We're talking about allegations of a systemic infiltration of Canadian institutions by organized ideological groups.
Now, according to a report from the Institute for the Study of Global Antisemitism and Policy, or ISGAP, this is the ideology they claim is at the core of the Muslim Brotherhood. They describe it as a movement with a deeply anti-Semitic and destructive goal, and that definition is absolutely central to their allegations about its activities in Canada.
The ISGAP report goes on to make several incredibly serious allegations. It claims the Muslim Brotherhood has established Canada as a strategic beachhead, basically a base of operations in North America. It says they're using it as a hub for money laundering and practicing something called entryism, which is a strategy of systematically infiltrating key institutions like universities and government. The report even claims that some of these front organizations have received funding from the Canadian government itself.
And this alleged infiltration has some serious consequences for national security, according to some analysts. Joe Adam George from the MacDonald Lawyer Institute points to a case where the Obama-era DEA supposedly flagged alleged Hezbollah activity in Canada, but he claims the RCMP sat on this information for about a decade.
This has reportedly led to a real breakdown in trust, with our allies sometimes holding back on sharing intelligence. So when you put all of this together, from the hate on the streets, to these personal stories of indoctrination, to these really serious allegations of systemic infiltration, it leaves Canada facing a series of profound and really difficult questions about its future.
And this is the central challenge, isn't it? As all these sources show, navigating this stuff isn't just some academic debate. How does a nation that's committed to multiculturalism and free expression protect itself from imported hatreds and alleged foreign influence without compromising its own core values? You know, finding that balance is now one of the most urgent questions facing Canada today.